All righty. It's been a while, but here we are. Welcome back to another Saturday live stream of what we call here, I guess it's an online support group on such that I personally host, and I've been doing this for the past 4+ years. And it's been a nice little journey with each and every single one of you. Some of you are regular, some of you come and go, and some of you come and never come back. And some of you are here for the first time. So wherever you fall in that spectrum of attendees and participants, I want to welcome you. My name is Param. And this pretty much, if you want to know what this live stream is, it's for anyone who firsthand or secondhand has ever experienced any pain as a result of addictions, mental illness, trauma, or grief and loss. And when you look at it that way, it better be a lot of people, if you think about it, because I think we're all going through this thing called life, and we all experience setbacks and challenges like the ones I just named. And the beauty of those are, as painful and as hard and it is to experience them, they do provide us with certain gifts and certain opportunities for whether it's growth, self, or a change in perspective, or, tapping into more gratitude. There is always something in the hard times. We just don't see them right off the bat, So I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. I am a licensed advanced alcohol and drug counselor. I am a faculty professor at the Saddleback in Mission Viejo College. Coach high school basketball. We just ended our basketball season. It was a fairly successful season, but kind of didn't get to where we wanted to get to. We lost in the first round of the playoffs. And just for point of reference, we're in South Orange County, which is Southern California. And our game was in Santa Barbara. So it was about a 4-hour drive, 5-hour in the rain. So we were in the bus for 5 hours there and 3 hours back. It was pretty much a whole workday just driving to come up and lose the game 63-61 or something like that. Painful experience, but it's all good. So, I've been in the recovery space since back in 2008. So all of the knowledge and wisdom that I've gained from other people, and all of the knowledge and wisdom that I've gained from firsthand working with people in this whole entire time is something that I kind of just want to pass on and be able to teach to you, and hopefully add a little value to your recovery. So all that being said, our talk today is all about what recovery is, because I do believe that all of us are recovering from something. Every single human being on this planet is recovering from something. Probably even like a little infant that's born is probably recovering from the trauma of like being born. You know what I mean? Like if you look at it from that level, everyone is recovering from something. And some of you might be going through some stuff right now that you really need to recover from. And but the most important part is I want you to understand. Oh, what's up, Alan? There you are. Hey, good to see you. Back in California. Happy to hear that. And you're recovering. Good. Hey, we're all recovering, but I'm happy to hear that you're back and doing the deal, man. It's always good to see you, brother. So, yesterday was Valentine's Day, right? So this is in real time. This is February 15th. This is not recording. I didn't record this before. Yesterday was Valentine's Day in America. And whatever your personal, perception is of that holiday, right? Some people say it's just a Hallmark holiday. They just do it to gain some money. Some people say every day should be Valentine's Day. Whatever your stance is. Some of you had a really good Valentine's Day. Some of you had a very bad Valentine's Day. Some of you didn't even care for Valentine's Day. They didn't even know it was Valentine's Day. Some of you celebrated with your friends. Some of you had like a singles party on Valentine's Day. Wherever you fall in that boat. What I want you to kind of explore and look at is the act of recovery is an act of self-love. So if you look at Valentine's Day from that perspective, for those of you who are choosing to recover today, then you're choosing to give yourself some love. Because without it, it's hard to recover. Because typically we feel certain emotions when we're struggling in life. We feel a lot of anger, guilt, shame, and all of those disconnect us from ourselves. There is no love in that. You can't be ashamed and love yourself at the same time. You can't be angry at self and others and love yourself at the same time. So hopefully you can kind of like wrap that. And if you didn't have one, maybe it's February 15th could be the day that you tap in and think of recovery as an act of self-love and make it your new Valentine's Day, at least for this moment. And then what I want to do is I want to go through and really help comprehend and understand what the whole essence of recovery is, right? And I'm going to use my acronym system. It is one that I've done before, but I've changed the content of it around a little bit. So if you've heard this one before, it's probably all going to be new original content for you. Even though some of the stuff is going to sound the same, what I'm going to say after what I am teaching is going to be a little bit different. So in order to understand what recovery even means, right, we have to define recovery. And I want you to know this, that recovery has nothing to do with drugs and alcohol. Nothing, right? Recovery has nothing to do with the challenges you might have with untreated mental illness. Recovery might not have anything to do with the person that passed away. Recovery might not have anything to do with the trauma that you endured in the past. What recovery has to do is, in the present moment, you have to regain something that's been lost, stolen, or destroyed. You have to find something or someone that's been lost, stolen, or destroyed. See, all of those things, like addictions, like mental illness, like trauma, like grief and loss, they disconnect us from self. And if you were, they continue to disconnect you even more, further and further from self. So the recovery process is almost like a search and rescue mission. You know, when like a little child goes missing or someone goes missing and the whole town goes and they start to, do like a scavenger hunt of trying to find the person. I'm literally, there's all people walking different directions. There's helicopters, there's just dogs sniffing things, and they're trying to find the person, find the scent, find the person. That's what recovery is. You're trying to find yourself. In life, if you experience any pain and tragedies and traumas and abuses and all that kind of stuff, at some point you got lost. And only a person that's lost makes those decisions that sometimes people make. So recovery is to regain something that's been lost, stolen, or destroyed, like a search and rescue mission. Like a search and rescue mission. So kind of think that is the kind of the premise of this conversation. So then I'm going to think about, so the word recover, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the different letters, we're going to go over each one of them. And the first one is something that I like to call remember. So the R of recovery is remember why you started. See, every single one of you today who have chosen to recover, to find yourself, first of all, you acknowledge that you've been lost. You can't find something unless it's been lost. There is no lost and found, right? If the item was never lost. So there is no recovery if you've never lost yourself. So if you're here and you're trying to recover, that tells me that you've identified with the fact that you've lost yourself. It doesn't make sense any other way. So when someone goes searching for themselves, searching for that connection to self, they have a reason. That reason has to be compelling enough that pushes you through difficulties and challenges and obstacles and the ups and downs of life that keeps pulling you through regardless of that stuff. You all have a reason for why you started. Remember why you started. So what is that reason? Well, call it what it is. Some people are doing it for someone else. Someone else in their life is lost and they're going into recovery to help find that person. Codependence. You can't go find somebody. They got to find themselves. You can't recover for somebody. They have to recover themselves. But guess what? If somebody else was lost and you love them, there's a very high possibility that you lost yourself in the process. That's why you need to recover. So some of you are doing it for someone else. That's okay. Some of you are doing it because your children got taken away from you. Good reason. Some of you are doing it because your spouse said, if you don't change, this is over. Great reason. Some of you are doing it because the boss put you on a leave and said, if you don't change, you lost your job. Good reason. Some of you might be doing it because you have been lost, haven't been going to school, or didn't have a passion or an interest or goal in life. Great reason. Some of you are doing it because your health is bad. You went to the doctor. Doctor said, hey, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease at risk. Good reason. So why am I saying it's important to remember why you started? Because as soon as so-and-so gets better, as soon as your spouse says, okay, everything's okay now, as soon as the boss says, welcome back to work, as soon as you go back to class, as soon as your kids are back in your life, right? People forget. How do I know this? Well, you do something for 12 years, 13 years of your life. You watch people come and go. You quickly realize that sometimes people forget why they started. And remembering why you started is important because it's a very personal and almost like it's a very personal and sensitive topic for each person because they're all unique. They're all different. Like everybody's motive and reason for recovery to search and find themselves is different. So make it special to yourself. I told you guys I'm a college teacher. And when I was going into, Alan said something here. Even though Alan said he's back in recovery, I don't know if the comments are popping up, but I could read it. He said, good reason, yes, but it's not going to work unless you honestly want it for yourself. So it's always okay to come in for something or someone else at first. So like all those good reasons I said, they're good. But at some point, so that's called external motivation. We do it for something or someone else, externally motivated. Most change usually starts from that. But at some point, that external motivation has to shift to something called internal motivation, that the person says, I'm actually continuing to do this for myself. Like that's my reason. And that's kind of what he's talking about there. And he probably knows firsthand that when you don't do it for yourself, what happens. So, I'm a teacher at Saddleback, and the reason why I started that is because of the teachers there that made a profound impact on my life. And I wanted to kind of be one of those people, right? Like there's this deep reason, like the reason I'm a counselor, the person that was my counselor was like, I went in because I was struggling with drugs and alcohol. I continued to go because these people inspired me. Like I had these new reasons. So our reasons also develop over time. What your reason was in the beginning might not be, but you always have to remember why you started this damn thing, right? Remember why you started. So the next one that I have here is this timeline of early expectations. This one is very similar to what I've said in the past because I actually share this every single time I talk. So people have these expectations that nobody knows who sets it for them. Maybe treatment centers do, but for some reason, people also set it for themselves. And those expectations are like, if I stop doing drugs and alcohol for 90 days, then everything should get better, right? So they create this thing. Well, I'm telling you guys this as someone that's a professional in the field. The only thing that gets better when you discontinue or stop the use of drugs and alcohol is your problems related to drugs and alcohol go away. Period. End of sentence. So someone might say, what about everything else? It's still right there. If you had estranged relationships rooted in conflict with your people that you love in your life and you stop using drugs and alcohol, it's still there. If you had, if you're overwhelmed with finances when you stop using drugs and alcohol, it's still there. If you have low self-esteem and you stop using drugs and alcohol, you still have low self-esteem. If you struggle with mental health, anxiety, depression, you stop using drugs and alcohol, still there. Might even be a little bit worse because now you're feeling all the emotions. So sometimes people say, well, what's the point if none of this stuff works? It's actually very simple because human beings overestimate what they can do in 30 days or 90 days, and they underestimate what they can do and accomplish in a year or 2 years. See, who says that 90 days is supposed to change everything? It's not real, man. You can't live a certain way your whole damn life and expect to stop using drugs and alcohol. 90 days later, you're a new person. That's why I always laugh when people do that whole New Year's, new year, new me. Like, no, it's not. It's the same you. You can't tell me that the change of the calendar going from December 31 of a year to January 1 is going to create change in who you are as a person. Like, come on. New year, new me. The only way a new year is a new you is if in that new year, for every single freaking day of that year, you did something for your change, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So it's really important right here to know that these early expectations that we set upon ourselves are dangerous. Expectations are the root of all heartbreak, says a poet named William Shakespeare. And I just want you to kind of caution, like this also to the parents, right? Like if you have a loved one that's getting sober and you're like, well, they're going to get sober now, so they're going to go back to school and have motivation to take all their classes. They're going to sit with us every single night and have dinner. They're going to know how to spend their money, and they're not going to buy vapes and caffeine now. Like, good luck. They're still going to suck at school. They probably don't want to spend too much time with you. And they're probably going to waste all their money on stuff that has no nutrition and is probably really bad for them at first. And yes, 30, 60, 90 days later, they might still be the same way. So you say, well, what's the point of all this? Because a year or 2 years later, they probably are either working somewhere consistently or back in school. They maybe have a vocation or trade. They start to prioritize their health a little bit. They like to come over and have dinner, frequently. Timeline is the timeline. I'm sorry to tell you, it's just not like, it just doesn't work that way. It's the same thing if for anyone recovering from grief and loss, right? They have these stages of grief. What do they got? Oh, first you're in shock, and then there's so much, oh, wow, I can't believe this happened, right? And then there's a denial of reality. This didn't happen. No, this didn't happen. This didn't happen. Then we go in these stages like bargaining, and it's like, I coulda, woulda, shoulda. What would I have done differently? How would I have known? What would I have said? And then you go to this deep stage of depression, like a really deep stage of depression, when it's like, what's the point of all this? And then you go in this thing that they call acceptance, and it's like everything's good. I'm telling you this firsthand as a human being that's experiencing grief and loss, not experiencing grief and loss. Those stages have no effing timeline. Any given moment, I can wake up in shock. Any given moment, I can go straight into denial. And this is, by the way, almost 2 years later. Every moment of every day, I can go into bargaining of like all the things I didn't do. Depression can come in so heavy that it just makes me not want to try. Put that however you want to put it. And the acceptance part, man, good luck on that one. But here's the thing. I've talked to people who have experienced loss. I've witnessed people who have experienced loss, significant loss of their child, loss of their grandchild, loss of their parent, loss of their sibling, loss of their spouse. And they all share the same thing. They all share that the roller coaster of grief is insanity. It's up and down and all around, but they get better over time. See, we're supposed to think that once we go through the stages of grief, then we're going to be okay. It's a lie. So the expectation that these stages come in order, and once they come in order, then you kind of accept it and you move on, that expectation is false. I don't know why they teach people that stuff. They shouldn't say this happens in order. They just say these stages exist in no particular order at all, and they can mumble and jumble at any time. But I'll go to a meeting and I'll hear someone say like, hey, the first 3 years after they lost their loved one was hell, and now 10 years later they're finally able to kind of change it, have a newfound perspective, a new appreciation, a new sense of comfort in life and all that stuff. And it's like that's what I'm talking about. These early expectations are dangerous. So watch them wherever you're recovering from. Same thing with trauma. If you were abused your whole life and you go to therapy for 90 days and you think, well, why do I still have PTSD? Why am I still just the name of the person, cringes me or puts me into a state of discomfort? Maybe it's going to take years. So please watch your early expectations, my friends. So the next one we have here is care for your recovery. So I usually do this crystal ball analogy. I'm not going to get into it because I just did it for the morning and it takes too much of my energy for the morning group people. I'm drink some coffee. So I'm going to say something pretty controversial for some, especially some of you codependents are not going to like what I'm about to say. Your recovery is the most important thing in your life. Your recovery is more important. So it doesn't matter what your recovery from what. Your recovery from addiction, your recovery from trauma, your recovery from grief and loss, your recovery from mental illness, whatever the recovery is. And nothing to do with drugs and alcohol. Whatever your recovery is more important than anything or anyone in your life. Yes, your recovery is more important than your child. Your recovery is more important than your spouse. Your recovery is more important than your parent. You want to know why? First, I got to tell you this before you get offended. I know that you love your child more than any thing anyone in this whole entire world does. I know that you love your spouse more than anything or anyone in this whole entire world. I know you love your parent more than anything or anyone in this whole entire world. But if you don't put your recovery first, you will not be able to show up for that child to give them the love that you have. So that love becomes useless. That life becomes meaningless. And when you don't show up for your child to give them the love that you have, the child starts to think and believe that my parent does not love me when I know you do. So your recovery is more important than anything else in your life. It's more important than anyone else in your life. And until you internalize that, until you understand that, until you believe that, and until you live that, it's not going to work when you put anything else above it. Trust me when I tell you that. You know, you could put your recovery all the way down on the priority list and quickly realize that you will never show up in any situation of your life the way you want to show up. The true version of you is lost. So for those of you who kind of wake up and your recovery is not your priority, just know you're not going to recover from it. And if you start looking at it from the lens that it's going to prevent you from giving the love that you have to others and them receiving the love that you have for them, then maybe you'll start thinking about it in a different way. Also happens with your physical health, like some of you might be struggling with some really serious like cardiovascular stuff, right? Like your heart problems, heart attacks, coronary disease, type 2 diabetes, all that kind of stuff. And I know you love your family, but you're not putting yourself above them. I don't know why. And, this is a good thing, Alan. I was sharing some good stuff. He wrote, I don't know if these are popping up, so the only reason I'm reading it, he said, we got to put we got to put us first, as selfish as it may sound. And that's the challenge that I have with society and how they frame that. Somewhere along the line, we've learned that when you put yourself first, it's selfish. It's not. It is putting self first, but putting self first doesn't mean it's selfish, right? Putting self first means I'm doing so because it's the only way I can show up for the people I love in my life. So that's a good one right there to care for your recovery. The next one I have here is overcome negative beliefs. Now, we all have negative beliefs about ourselves, sometimes about others. But I want you to know this, that they're not original thoughts. Someone might be like, really thinking negatively about themselves, and this is who I am, and this is how I am, and all that kind of stuff. And I've always been this way. It's not an original thought. It just isn't. I wish I could tell you that all your negative beliefs are your beliefs or your thoughts. They're not. Those thoughts were never in your head when you popped out in this world. But they're in your head now. So what happened? Where did they come from? Simple. Came from others. So if you had, family members that put you down, belittled you, said harsh things to you, called you things, people might have said it in school to you, you start to think like, hey, maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I am stupid. Maybe I won't amount to anything. And these thoughts go in your head. So you start to believe those. They become your negative beliefs about self. And sometimes maybe people didn't even say anything to you directly. I'll give you an example. When I was in elementary school and like junior high, I was on the, like, I'm a little chubby, right? I was like little stomach, little man boobies, like my thighs were kind of a little chubby. And it looks cute when I look at pictures, it looks cute. But society is wired in a different way. Right? I think honestly, all kids are just perfect the way they are. There's no like this child's better than that child because this child has less amount of body fat. This is ridiculous, right? As adults, but as children, we don't think that way. And I see like on, growing up, you watch like certain people have like six packs, right? I was growing up like Brad Pitt in Fight Club had the six pack that all the girls they were obsessed with. And or like Abercrombie models, they have these six packs. And I would look down on my stomach and I didn't have a six pack. And I wanted one and I didn't have one. And it starts to make you feel like, hey, like I'm not as attractive as those people are, right? It's something, I mean, I'm talking about like, this happens to girls all the time. I mean, like, talk about like body dysmorphia. There's 5,000 versions of a healthy human being, a healthy girl that gets raised, but they all get compared to one version of a Barbie. So anyone that doesn't fall in that category starts to think certain things about themselves. They do. And what that does is it creates beliefs about self that are just rooted in what? Some random thing that the media or society says is the definition of beauty. It's insane. Health is health. And so for me, for example, that body dysmorphia, and my mom was watching this, hilarious. I've been in the pursuit of a six-pack my whole life. But I remember like trying to get any little gadget or device as a child to like get a six-pack. There was one, it's so funny, I can't believe I'm admitting this. It's probably like 15 years old, 16 years old. And, back then we watched regular TV because there's no streaming channels. And I would, they'd have like these infomercials. I can't even say this with a straight face. They had these infomercials. And the infomercial was about, was like this belt you put on. Well, first you put like all this, like, it comes like this jelly lube thing you put on your stomach, and then you wear this belt, and then the belt like starts to like vibrate and like zap your stomach, and so it's like contract your ab muscles. And I thought if I wear this belt, I'm gonna start getting a six-pack. And it was an infomercial, so I didn't have a credit card or anything like that. So I tell my mom, I start like crying because I want this so bad. My mom buys me this thing. I put it on my stomach, and the zaps were so painful that I probably used it like 3 times my whole life. And it's safe to say it didn't bring me a six-pack. But I'm saying like that's the extent we go to. And for me, it led to like body dysmorphia. It's a thing for men too, body dysmorphia. I would I got into anabolic steroids at a really young age, like genuinely young age, which led to like even having a surgery because of a excess amount of estrogen from the byproduct of testosterone. You had to get cut open, all that kind of stuff, and to remove a gland of tissue that got created in my body. Because and then the bigger I got, the buffer I got, I would still look at myself in the mirror and say, I'm still too small. I'm not small enough. And I'm like 240 pounds of muscle at one point, and I still thought I was too small. Isn't that crazy? Because our negative beliefs start to creep up in our life. And, for education, for example, I got a good example here is I always thought that I couldn't, after I dropped out of college or, university, 20 years old, 21 years old, I didn't go back to school until like 4 years. I didn't think I could do it until I did. And then there was a new version, the guy that couldn't do it and the guy that just did it. Which one was I? I was both. So the only way you can break your negative beliefs is through massive action, as Tony Robbins says. So the next one right here, the V, I got to go a little quicker. The V, I used to do this one called values. Now I changed it to victories. So what you want to do in your recovery process, you want to recognize and celebrate your victories. I watched this in my family group on Tuesday, some loved ones, including myself and my family, like when we feel a little bit better, when depression is a little bit lifted, or you just kind of, you feel a little bit less foggy, or you're able to sleep a little bit better. It might not sound like a big thing, but it's important to celebrate those and be like, hey, thank God I'm feeling a little bit better now. Thank God it's like the fog is lifting a little bit now. What's Butter doing back there? He's running around with someone's shoe. Okay. And for example, the victory of like, let's say someone gets one day clean. Okay. I want to put something in perspective for some of you who don't have addiction problems. You might be like, well, so what? The person didn't use drugs and alcohol for one day. Good for them. For that person, they might have been chasing that one day for 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. You might not think it's a big deal, but for that person, for the past 2 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, they've been trying to put together 24 hours without using a drink or a drug. It's a victory when they do. And when they put that second day together, second day, you might say, well, what's the big deal? The person didn't use a drug for 2 days. To that person, it might have been their first time since they picked up a drug that they went 2 days without using it. Ever. Celebrate the victories. You go to the gym and you lose 5 pounds, but your goal is to lose 50. You celebrate those damn 5 pounds. Seriously. If your loved one isn't talking to you and doesn't trust you anymore, and one day they say, hey, let's go to lunch. And at lunch, you realize they still don't want to get back with you or they don't want to talk to you, but they went to lunch with you, celebrate that victory. Celebrate all the little victories you have, because if we don't, we're going to constantly feel like a failure. You're going to constantly feel like a failure if you don't celebrate your victories, because if you look at life in a micro lens and from this close up and not zoom out and look at the bigger picture, you're never going to see the total picture. It's important for us to recognize and celebrate all the victories in our life in the recovery process. Just being in recovery itself is a victory. Genuinely, it's a victory. So the next one that I have here is something called every day. I wrote, that is what it takes. I wish I could tell you Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, work on your recovery and kick back and enjoy on the weekends, and everything will be okay. There's no truth to that. The 3 days that you take off, if you take off 3 days every single week and you wonder why your life isn't getting better and why you're not recovering, it's kind of like going on a search and rescue mission for somebody and thinking that you're going to find them if you search only 5 days a week, and 3 days you just kick back and start over again and search the same roads again. Take 3 days off, same roads again. You're never going to find them. So what you want to do is you want to ensure to yourself that you do not take any days off the recovery process. The level of intensity that you have doesn't have to be 10 out of 10 every day. It just has to be every day. Some days it might be a 1 out of 10. Some days it might be a 2 out of 10. Some days it might be a 3 out of 10, but it's got to be something out of 10 every day. No zeros out of 10. A 0 out of 10 kind of almost negates an entire day of growth. I think it negates more because we go uphill at a certain pace, but we go downhill faster. So if you climb for 5 days and you cruise or coast or do nothing for 2 days, right back to where you started. Gravity of recovery. That's a law. It's a law of this world. Some comments over here. What do we got? Jess, it's okay you're late. You made it. Tony, good morning. Feel free to watch. And yep, you can rewatch when I'm done. No worries. Good to see all you guys. So please remember every day. And if I lost anybody there, if you said this is too much for me to do every day, just remember, whatever you're recovering from, you were probably doing it every day. Right? So if you want to recover from it, you have to it's like a counterweight, counterbalance. You got to do it every day. The only way this stuff works. And the next one I like, this is new, I put in there. I said, reach your hand out, get and give help. Okay, so you got to reach your hand out. That's the R of the last part of recovery. So it's one of the most courageous acts to do in life is to reach out and ask for help. To reach out and say, please, somebody help me. I can't do this by myself. Just to get to that point alone, we know we got to endure so much pain because we're so damn stubborn. We never want to ask for that help because we believe we could do it. I should be able to do it. Why can't I do it? I know better. But when you reach out for help, something magical happens. People actually help you. Now, the second part of this that I think is really important is to reach your hand out, not to get help. Reach your hand out to help somebody. Literally, reach your hand out, identify someone that might need help and try to help them. Because two things happen in that moment. One, when you reach your hand out in that moment to focus on someone else, you don't think about yourself. That's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to not think about what you're going through once in a while. The other thing that happens is when you reach out to help that person, even though you're helping them out, you ultimately start to help yourself out because you start to feel better about yourself. Your self-esteem gets better. You feel like you're making a contribution. You feel like you're a part of a greater good. You feel like your recovery matters, right? Like, for example, this is not just addiction. So for us in the addiction world, if I see someone struggling, like I want to reach out to them, you know, and kind of share my story and hear their story and see how I could help. And Al-Anon, which is like the family members, if you've been there for a while and you see a family member come in and they're like struggling, they're terrified of their loved one's addiction, reach out to them, help them. Introduce yourself, share your story. If you've gone through grief and loss and you see someone coming in and struggling with grief and loss, reach out to them. And here's the thing, if they don't want to talk, just say, hey, I understand you don't want to talk. I respect your boundaries. If you ever want to talk or need to talk or just need someone to be there for you, here's my phone number. Feel free to call me or text me anytime. Reach out. Reach out and help people, man. Because here's the thing. It's Mother Teresa has a really good quote that I genuinely like. She says, the only way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Right? So a lot of us are trying to find ourselves, to recover, to regain something that's been lost, stolen, or destroyed, and that's ourselves. We're on a search and rescue mission. And Mother Teresa says the only way you can find yourself is to lose yourself in the service to others. So be that as it may, it might mean something to you, it might not mean something to you. Marinate on that thought, hear it, digest it, see how you can apply this stuff. So recovery is all about our journey and our quest to find oneself after we've been lost. You cannot find something in life unless it's been lost. So if you're here for recovery, that's telling me that you've already accepted the fact that you're lost on some level. That's okay. It's a prerequisite. It's a requirement to being found is to be lost. So remember why you started this recovery process. It's a very unique and sensitive thing for each person because it's very personalized. Okay, it's very personalized. Be careful for any early expectations you have about the change process, about the recovery process. Grief and loss doesn't have a timeline. Addiction recovery doesn't have a timeline. Trauma recovery doesn't have a timeline. Mental illness recovery doesn't have a timeline. It just is, right? Remember to care for this thing. You got to care for your recovery because it is the most important thing in your life. It's most important than the child you love the most. Most important than the spouse that you're in love with. Most important than whoever or whatever in your life. Because if you don't care for it, you won't be able to show up to give them the love that you have. And way worse, they will never be able to receive the love that you have for them. So they will always assume that you don't love them. And the O is to overcome these negative beliefs about self. They're not original thoughts. You are not your thoughts. They were implanted literally in your head from others, from external sources. Sometimes it could be family members, sometimes friends, sometimes society, sometimes schools. They're not original. So overcome them. They're not you. Make sure you celebrate all the victories. It's little, medium, big, large. Right? Any victory you have in the path of the search and rescue, celebrate it. And you got to do this every day. No days off. It doesn't have to be 10 out of 10 every day because you burn yourself out. Some days go in all day, man. 10 out of 10. Some days give it a 7. Some days give it a 3. Some days give it a 1. But never give it a 0. Give something. And the last one is to reach your hand out when you need help. And also reach your hand out to give help. And if you do those, I would bet if we were in Las Vegas, I would put in all my chips. I don't gamble, but if I did gamble, I put all my chips on the fact that you're going to find what it is you're looking for. And that's the connection that you had at one point with yourself. And when you reconnect to true self, it feels good. It feels really, really good. So all that being said, next week I won't be here because on Tuesday I'm having a deviated septum surgery for my chronic sinus issues. I don't know what type of a recovery it's going to have, but it shouldn't be too bad. And so hopefully when the congestion's gone, I don't have to mouth breathe anymore and I won't talk so nasally. And my hope is that all of a sudden I reemerge with a new voice and I can go on finally on America's Got Talent and audition. And you never know, you might see me on the TVs one day. So love and appreciate all of you. I'll see you back. Whenever I see you, I'll make an announcement when I come back. Thanks, everyone. Take care.